The night was quiet when Maya found the letter, the kind of silence that makes every creak in the house feel like a whisper from the past. She sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by dusty photo albums stacked against peeling wallpaper, her fingers trailing absent-mindedly over the worn fabric of an old sweater that still carried a faint trace of lavender. She hadn't planned to be here tonight, she hadn't wanted to. Coming back to her late mother's house was like walking through a graveyard of memories. Every corner, every scent, every faded picture frame on the walls screamed of a life now gone. Her mother had passed away just 2 weeks ago, and in that short time, grief had turned Maya's world into a foggy labyrinth. The house, once warm and alive with laughter, felt like a hollow museum of everything she had lost. She was folding sweaters, boxing up books, and pretending she was fine when her fingers brushed against something hidden at the back of her mother's dresser drawer. It was a small wooden box, its surface cracked with age, the varnish worn away in places, and on its lid was a faded sticker of a red rose. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She pulled it out, her breath catching in her throat as if she had stumbled upon a secret her mother had never intended for her to find. With trembling hands, she opened it, and there, resting inside, was a single letter tied neatly with a silk ribbon, its edges yellowed by time. Maya hesitated before untying it. She recognized the handwriting immediately, though she had only seen samples of it in a handful of old documents and photographs. It was her father's handwriting. Her father, Daniel Carter, had died when she was just 5 years old. She had no real memories of him, only fragments from stories her mother told late at night when the sadness would slip through her defenses. Maya had grown up with an ache for a man she never really knew, a father who had become more myth than memory. And now, here was his voice, locked inside paper, waiting to speak to her across decades. Her hands shook violently as she unfolded the fragile page and began to read, her eyes tracing the familiar curves of his letters. "My dearest Anna," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I could not stay long enough to grow old with you. I need you to know that you were my greatest joy, and Maya, our little Maya, she is the piece of my heart I leave behind in this world. I want you to tell her that I loved her, that I thought of her every day, even in my final breath. Promise me you'll tell her, Anna. Promise me she will never doubt that her father loved her more than life itself." The tears came quickly, hot and relentless, blurring her vision as she clutched the letter to her chest. Maya let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp, a sound she hadn't heard herself make in years. All the walls she had built, all the years of pretending she didn't care that she had grown up without a father, crumbled in an instant. She had always assumed her father's story was too tragic to be spoken aloud, a wound her mother had chosen to keep sealed. And now, here she was, holding proof that he had loved her fiercely, even if life had been cruel enough to take him away too soon. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat curled up on her childhood bed, the letter pressed against her heart, the soft hum of rain against the window keeping her company. She had thought she had already cried all the tears she had, losing her mother, but this was a different kind of grief. This was grief for a man she never truly got to know, grief for the years stolen from them, grief for every birthday and milestone he had missed. But beneath the sorrow was something else, something warm. For the first time, Maya felt her father's presence, not as a ghostly absence but as a man who had loved her deeply. She wanted more. She needed more. In the days that followed, Maya threw herself into finding pieces of her father's story. She spent hours going through every box in the attic, every dusty photo album tucked away in corners. She found pictures of her parents when they were young, her father laughing in a sunlit park, her mother leaning against him, their hands clasped like they belonged together. There were snapshots of them dancing in a kitchen lit only by a single lamp, their faces glowing with a happiness that seemed almost unreal now. But there were no more letters. No explanation for why her mother had kept this one hidden. Questions gnawed at her. Why hadn't her mother told her the depth of her father's love? Why had she kept his words locked away? Maybe she had been trying to protect Maya. Maybe the pain had been too heavy to pass on. Or maybe some secrets were just too sacred to share. Weeks turned into months, and Maya's grief transformed into determination. She decided she couldn't let her father's story remain unfinished. She needed to know more about him, not just as a name in family photographs, but as a man who had lived, loved, and left behind a legacy she had yet to uncover. She started with the few facts she had. Daniel Carter had been a musician. Her mother had once told her he used to play guitar in local cafes and bars, though she had said it with a wistfulness that hinted at heartbreak. Maya tracked down old newspaper archives and stumbled upon a clipping from a local paper featuring her father playing at a summer festival. In the grainy black and white photo, he was young, his eyes bright with passion, his fingers strumming a guitar that looked well loved. The next day, Maya found herself standing outside a small cafe from the article. It was still there, though the sign above the door was weathered, and the paint on the windowsill was chipped. As she stepped inside, the smell of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon wrapped around her like a warm embrace. She ordered a cup of tea and sat at a corner table, clutching the photograph she had printed out. An older man behind the counter noticed her staring at the picture. He wiped his hands on a rag and approached her table with a curious smile. "Daniel Carter," he said softly, his voice tinged with recognition. Maya's heart leapt. "You knew him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded, his eyes softening. "Everyone around here knew him. He was unforgettable." "I'm his daughter," she said, her throat tightening. The man studied her face for a moment before nodding knowingly. "I see it, you have his smile." They talked for hours. His name was George, and he had owned the cafe for decades. He told Maya stories she had never heard, how her father would come in early to practice before the cafe opened, how he always stayed late to help clean up after his shows, how he would sit in this very corner and scribble lyrics into a tattered notebook. "He loved your mother more than anything," George said with a wistful smile. He'd talk about her between every song. Said she was his muse. Maya's eyes filled with tears. It felt like she was finally meeting her father, not through pictures or secondhand stories, but through the warmth in George's voice. George disappeared into the back and returned with a worn guitar case. "He left this here," he said. "Told me to keep it safe. Said one day, someone would come for it." Maya's breath caught as she opened the case. Inside was her father's guitar. The wood was scratched, its strings slightly rusted, but it felt alive in her hands. Tucked beneath the guitar was a notebook filled with lyrics. She spent days reading through the notebook. Each page was a love letter to her mother, to the life they dreamed of building together, and to the daughter he wouldn't get to watch grow up. There was even a song titled, "For Maya." One night, Maya sat in her apartment with her father's guitar resting in her lap. She didn't know how to play, but she strummed softly, feeling each vibration resonate through her bones. She recorded herself reading his letter aloud, pairing it with the sound of the rain and her father's guitar in the background. She uploaded it to her small YouTube channel, titling it, "The Last Letter." She expected a handful of friends to watch it. Instead, the video spread quickly. Strangers from all over the world left comments, sharing their own stories of loss, of parents they missed, of love that had outlived death. Some said her voice made them cry, others said the story gave them hope. Maya realized something profound. Her father's love had not died with him. It lived on, in her, in the music, and now in the hearts of people who had never met him. Months passed, and Maya began turning her father's lyrics into songs. She shared her journey online, her grief, her healing, her discovery of a man she wished she could have known. One day, she received a message that made her cry harder than she had in years. It was from a woman named Clara, who wrote, "Your father saved my life. He used to volunteer at the community center. I was a teenager then, struggling with depression, and he would sit with me, play his guitar, and remind me that life was worth living. I owe him everything. Thank you for sharing his story." Maya wept as she read those words. Her father's life may have been short, but it was full of purpose. His love had rippled outward, touching lives she would never fully know. She decided to honor him the best way she knew how. She organized a small concert at the cafe where he used to play, inviting anyone who had been touched by his story or music. On the night of the event, the cafe was filled with people, some who had known Daniel, some who had discovered him through Maya's videos. She stood on the small stage, holding her father's guitar, her heart pounding. "This is for my parents," she said, her voice trembling. "For the love they gave me, even when I didn't understand it. And for anyone who's ever felt the kind of loss that makes you feel like you can't go on. This is proof that love outlives us." She began to play. The melody was simple, her voice shaky but full of emotion. The audience sat in silence, some wiping tears from their eyes. As she sang her father's lyrics, she felt him there with her, and for a moment, she could almost see her mother in the crowd, smiling proudly. When the final note faded, the room erupted in applause, but Maya's tears were unstoppable. She realized something beautiful: their story wasn't over. It was alive, carried forward in her music, in the stories shared that night, in the lives her father had touched. Years later, Maya would tell her own daughter the story of her grandparents, how her grandfather's music saved lives, how her grandmother's quiet strength carried them through tragedy. She would pass down the guitar, the letter, and the songs, telling her daughter, "They loved you before you were even born."